Robert Chen walked through the rusted gates of Thornfield Amusement Park on March 15, 2005. The park had been closed since 1992, its rides left to decay under years of rain and neglect. Robert had worked as a ride operator at Thornfield from 1985 to 1991, and nostalgia had brought him back to photograph the deteriorating attractions for a documentary project about abandoned American theme parks. The morning air was cool as Robert made his way past the skeletal remains of the Ferris wheel. He carried a digital camera and a flashlight. The park covered 40 acres in rural Pennsylvania, 2 hours north of Philadelphia. Weeds pushed through cracked asphalt. Faded signs advertised attractions that no longer functioned. Robert stopped at the Thunder Mountain roller coaster. The massive wooden structure had been the park's centerpiece, a double-loop coaster that reached speeds of 60 miles per hour. Now it stood silent, its tracks warped and splintered. Robert approached the maintenance area beneath the ride's first drop. He knelt to photograph the deteriorating support beams. His flashlight beam swept across the ground and caught something white, wedged between two concrete foundation blocks. Robert moved closer. The object was partially buried in dirt and leaves. He pulled on latex gloves from his camera bag and carefully extracted the object. It was a sneaker. A child-sized Nike sneaker with red stripes, its fabric rotted but still recognizable. Robert's hands trembled as he examined it. Inside the shoe, he found something that made his breath catch: a small bone. Robert stood and swept his flashlight more carefully around the area. 3 feet from where he found the sneaker, he spotted what appeared to be fabric partially buried in the soil. He used a stick to carefully move the dirt aside. More bones became visible, along with fragments of a blue jacket. His mind raced back to 1988. That summer, a 15-year-old boy named Kevin Marshall had disappeared from Thornfield Park. Robert remembered the massive search, the police interviews, the park remaining closed for 2 weeks. They never found Kevin. The case went cold. The park struggled financially after the incident and finally closed in 1992. Robert immediately called 911. He gave the dispatcher his location and described what he had found. Then he called the local police department directly and asked to speak with someone about the Kevin Marshall case. 40 minutes later, Detective Sarah Brennan arrived with a forensics team. Sarah was 38 years old, a veteran of the Pennsylvania State Police. She had worked missing persons cases for 12 years and knew the Marshall case well, though it had occurred before her time with the department. Robert led them to the site beneath Thunder Mountain. The forensics team established a perimeter and began careful excavation. Within 2 hours, they had uncovered a partial skeleton, clothing fragments, a wallet, and a student ID card. The ID showed Kevin Marshall's face, dated September 1987. Sarah interviewed Robert at the scene. He explained his history as a ride operator and his reason for visiting the abandoned park. She took detailed notes about the exact location of the discovery and the condition of the remains. "I was here that summer," Robert said. "I worked the log flume ride. When Kevin disappeared, they questioned all of us. Police searched everywhere. How did they miss this?" Sarah examined the site carefully. The area beneath Thunder Mountain had been used for maintenance access and equipment storage. During the 1988 investigation, police had searched the park extensively, but the specific location where Robert found the remains was behind a locked maintenance gate that required specialized access. "Who had keys to this area?" Sarah asked. Robert thought back. "Only senior maintenance staff and ride supervisors. Maybe 5 or 6 people total. It was restricted because of electrical equipment and hydraulic systems." Sarah made notes. She asked Robert to provide a list of everyone he remembered working in maintenance during that period. He named 6 people: Thomas Whitmore, the maintenance supervisor; Carl Rodriguez and James Patterson, senior mechanics; Linda Hayes, the electrical systems manager; and 2 junior technicians whose names he couldn't recall. The forensics team worked until sunset. They recovered the complete skeleton, clothing items, the wallet, a wristwatch stopped at 8:47, and a small backpack containing school supplies. Everything was carefully documented and transported to the State Forensics Laboratory. Sarah drove to the Marshall family home that evening. Kevin's mother, Patricia Marshall, was now 52 years old. She had never remarried after her husband died in 1995. Patricia had spent 17 years hoping for answers about her son's disappearance. Sarah knocked on the door at 7 o'clock. Patricia answered, her face showing immediate recognition of an official visit. Sarah introduced herself and asked to come inside. "We found remains at Thornfield Park today," Sarah said. "We believe they may be Kevin's. I'm very sorry." Patricia sat down heavily. Tears filled her eyes, but her voice remained steady. "Where?" "Beneath the Thunder Mountain roller coaster. A former park employee found them accidentally." Patricia closed her eyes. "After all this time, under the ride, they searched that park for weeks." Sarah explained the restricted location and the ongoing investigation. She promised Patricia that the department would pursue every lead to determine exactly what had happened. Patricia provided DNA samples for comparison with the remains. As Sarah drove back to the station, she reviewed the case file on her laptop. Kevin Marshall had visited Thornfield Park on July 23, 1988, with 3 friends: David Chen, Marcus Williams, and Jennifer Lopez. The 4 teenagers had arrived at noon and separated around 3 o'clock. Kevin told his friends he wanted to ride Thunder Mountain one more time. That was the last confirmed sighting. Park security footage from that day showed Kevin entering the Thunder Mountain queue at 3:14 p.m. He never appeared on cameras leaving the ride. His friends reported him missing at 5:30 p.m. when they couldn't find him at their agreed meeting spot. The original investigation had interviewed over 200 people: park employees, visitors, vendors, everyone present that day. No one saw anything suspicious. No evidence of foul play was found. The case went cold after 6 months. Now, 17 years later, Sarah had remains and a location. She pulled the personnel files for everyone Robert had mentioned. Thomas Whitmore had been 51 in 1988, the head of park maintenance for 15 years. He died in 1998 from a heart attack. Carl Rodriguez, now 63, lived in Ohio. James Patterson, 61, had moved to Florida. Linda Hayes, 59, still lived in Pennsylvania, working as an electrical contractor. Sarah scheduled interviews with all surviving former employees. The forensics lab confirmed preliminary identification through dental records within 2 days. The remains were definitely Kevin Marshall. The investigation was officially reopened. Sarah assembled a task force of 4 detectives. They began by reconstructing the events of July 23, 1988, using the original case file and new forensic evidence. The position of the remains suggested Kevin had been placed beneath Thunder Mountain deliberately, in a location not visible without accessing the restricted maintenance area. Dr. Michael Torres, the state medical examiner, performed a detailed analysis. He determined the cause of death was blunt force trauma to the skull, consistent with a fall or impact. The injury pattern suggested Kevin had struck his head on a metal surface. Time of death was consistent with the day of disappearance. "Could this have been an accident?" Sarah asked. Dr. Torres showed her the X-rays. "The skull fracture shows impact from behind. If he fell from the ride, the injury pattern would be different. Someone struck him or pushed him backward into something hard." Sarah photographed the injury evidence. This was now a homicide investigation. Someone had killed Kevin Marshall and hidden his body in a restricted area of the park, a location that required keys and knowledge of the facility layout. She returned to the abandoned park with her team. They examined Thunder Mountain's structure in detail, comparing it to original blueprints from the park's construction in 1983. The maintenance area where Kevin was found had housed hydraulic pump systems for the ride's lift mechanism. Access required going through a locked metal door painted to match the ride's scenic design. Detective Frank Morrison examined the door's remains. The lock was corroded, but evidence suggested it had been forced open at some point. Scratch marks on the metal frame indicated someone had used tools to bypass the lock. "Professional job," Frank said. "Whoever did this knew what they were doing." Sarah photographed the door and surrounding area. She reviewed security footage from July 23, 1988. The cameras had covered public areas but not maintenance zones. No footage existed of anyone accessing the restricted area beneath Thunder Mountain. The investigation revealed that maintenance staff entered that area approximately once per week for routine inspections. The last recorded inspection before Kevin's disappearance was July 18, 1988. The next scheduled inspection was July 30th, but by then, the park was closed for the investigation. Sarah interviewed Linda Hayes on March 20th, 2005. Linda met her at a coffee shop in Pittsburgh. Linda was 59, her hair gray, her manner professional. "I remember that day perfectly," Linda said. "The police questioned me for hours. I was supervising electrical work on the carousel. I never went near Thunder Mountain." Sarah showed her the maintenance schedule. Who else had access to the restricted areas? Linda provided the same names Robert had mentioned: Thomas Whitmore, Carl Rodriguez, James Patterson, and herself. She added 2 junior technicians, David Schultz and Raymond Foster. "Thomas was very strict about access," Linda said. "He kept all the master keys. If someone needed to enter a restricted area, they had to check out keys from his office and sign a log." Sarah's pulse quickened. "There was a sign-out log?" "Yes. Thomas kept meticulous records. Everything was documented." Sarah immediately requested all archived materials from Thornfield Park's closure. 3 days later, boxes of documents arrived at the station. Among them was Thomas Whitmore's maintenance log from 1988. She found the entries for July 1988. On July 23rd, one person had checked out the master key for Thunder Mountain's maintenance area, Carl Rodriguez, at 2:45 p.m. The log showed he returned the key at 4:30 p.m. Sarah felt a chill. Kevin had entered Thunder Mountain's queue at 3:14 p.m. Carl had access to the exact location where Kevin's body was found during the precise time frame of the disappearance. She pulled Carl Rodriguez's file. In 1988, he was 39 years old, married with 2 children, a senior mechanic with 12 years at Thornfield. His interview from the original investigation showed nothing suspicious. He claimed he was performing routine maintenance on the bumper cars ride all afternoon, but the log proved he had checked out keys to Thunder Mountain. Sarah called Detective Morrison. "We need to talk to Carl Rodriguez immediately, and I want to know everything about him." The perfect employee detective Sarah Brennan drove to Cleveland, Ohio, on March 24, 2005. Carl Rodriguez lived in a suburban neighborhood east of the city. Sarah brought Detective Frank Morrison with her. They had spent 2 days researching Carl's background before making contact. Carl Rodriguez was now 63 years old. After Thornfield Park closed in 1992, he had worked at Cedar Point Amusement Park in Sandusky until retiring in 2003. He lived alone. His wife had died in 2000, and his 2 children were adults living in other states. Sarah and Frank knocked on Carl's door at 9 o'clock in the morning. Carl answered wearing jeans and a flannel shirt. He was medium height, with gray hair and thick glasses. "Mr. Rodriguez?" Sarah showed her badge. "I'm Detective Brennan, Pennsylvania State Police. This is Detective Morrison. We need to talk about Thornfield Park and Kevin Marshall." Carl's expression didn't change. "They found him." "Yes, 3 weeks ago. May we come in?" Carl stepped aside. His house was neat and sparsely furnished. Family photos covered one wall. Sarah noticed pictures of 2 young adults, presumably his children, and several photos of Carl in his Thornfield Park uniform. They sat in the living room. Sarah pulled out her notebook. "Mr. Rodriguez, we've reviewed the maintenance logs from July 1988. On July 23rd, the day Kevin Marshall disappeared, you checked out the master key for Thunder Mountain's maintenance area at 2:45 p.m. Carl nodded slowly. "I suppose I did. That was 17 years ago. The log shows you returned the key at 4:30 p.m. Can you tell us what you were doing during that time?" "Routine maintenance inspection. I checked the hydraulic systems, lubricated the lift chain, verified pressure readings. Standard procedure." Frank leaned forward. "In your original interview, you stated you were working on the bumper cars ride that afternoon." Carl was quiet for a moment. "Did I? I honestly don't remember what I told police back then. I worked on multiple rides every day." Sarah watched his face carefully. "Kevin Marshall's remains were found in the Thunder Mountain maintenance area, the exact location you had access to during the time he disappeared." "I read about it in the news," Carl said. "Terrible thing, but I didn't see that boy. I did my inspection and left." "Did you see anyone else in that area?" "No. It was restricted. I was alone. Sarah pulled out photos of the crime scene. The medical examiner determined Kevin died from blunt force trauma. Someone struck him and hid his body in that maintenance area. Carl looked at the photos without visible emotion. That's awful. But it wasn't me. Frank asked, why did you tell investigators in 1988 that you were working on the bumper cars? I must have been confused. Or maybe they wrote it down wrong. I worked on many rides that summer. Thunder Mountain needed constant maintenance. The hydraulic system always had problems. Sarah made notes. Were you alone the entire time you were in that maintenance area? Yes. Did you see Kevin Marshall anywhere in the park that day? I don't recall seeing him specifically. There were hundreds of visitors. Did you notice anything unusual? Anyone acting suspiciously near Thunder Mountain? Carl shook his head. Nothing stands out. It was a normal day until the boy was reported missing. Sarah shifted her approach. Tell me about Thomas Whitmore. Carl's expression softened slightly. Thomas was a good supervisor. Fair, experienced, very organized. He ran maintenance operations efficiently. Was he strict about key access? Extremely. Every key was logged. No exceptions. Did anyone ever take keys without logging them? Not that I know of. Thomas would have fired someone for that. Frank asked, what was your relationship with Thomas? Professional. We worked together for 12 years before I left Thornfield. He taught me a lot about complex ride systems. Sarah watched Carl's body language. He appeared calm, his answers consistent. Either he was innocent or an exceptional liar. Mr. Rodriguez, would you be willing to provide a DNA sample? Do I need a lawyer? You're not under arrest. We're gathering information. But you had access to the location where Kevin died during the exact time frame of his death. We need to eliminate you as a suspect. Carl considered this. I didn't kill that boy. I'll provide whatever you need. A technician took Carl's DNA sample. Sarah and Frank spent another hour questioning him about the layout of Thunder Mountain, his typical maintenance procedures, and other staff members who might have had access. Carl described his routine inspection process in detail. He would enter through the maintenance door, check hydraulic pressure gauges, inspect the lift chain for wear, lubricate moving parts, and verify electrical connections. A complete inspection took approximately 90 minutes. Did you keep any personal records of your work? Sarah asked. Thomas kept all the official logs. I just did the work and reported to him. What about after Thomas died in 1998? Did you keep any of his materials? No. The park was already closed by then. Everything was archived or destroyed. Sarah thanked Carl and gave him her card. As they drove back to Pennsylvania, Frank expressed skepticism. He's too calm, Frank said. Most innocent people get nervous when questioned about a murder. Aye? Or he's telling the truth, Sarah replied. We need more than his presence at the scene. The forensics report might give us something. They returned to the station and met with Dr. Torres. The medical examiner had completed his full analysis of Kevin's remains. I found fibers embedded in the skull fracture, Dr. Torres said. Cotton and polyester blend, consistent with work clothing from that era. Also traces of hydraulic fluid on the victim's jacket. Sarah examined the evidence bags. Can you match the fibers to specific clothing? Possibly if you provide comparison samples. The hydraulic fluid is standard industrial grade, used in most amusement park rides. So Kevin was definitely in that maintenance area, and someone wearing work clothes struck him. That's consistent with the evidence. The injury suggests he was struck from behind with a metal object or pushed backward into machinery. Sarah reviewed the crime scene photos again. The hydraulic pump system had multiple metal surfaces that could cause such an injury. If Kevin had been pushed or had fallen backward, he could have struck his head on the equipment. She pulled the personnel files for all Thornfield maintenance staff. 6 people had master key access in July 1988. Thomas Whitmore was dead. That left 5 suspects: Carl Rodriguez, James Patterson, Linda Hayes, David Schultz, and Raymond Foster. Detective Morrison traced the current locations of the remaining suspects. James Patterson, 61, lived in Tampa, Florida, working as a consultant for theme park design. David Schultz, 58, had died in a car accident in 1995. Raymond Foster, 56, lived in Baltimore, Maryland, operating a small auto repair shop. Sarah scheduled interviews with Patterson and Foster. She also wanted to re-interview Linda Hayes with new information. On March 28, 2005, Sarah met Linda Hayes at her office in Harrisburg. Linda arrived carrying a briefcase, her manner professional. "Thank you for meeting again," Sarah said. "We've made progress in the investigation." Linda sat down. "I saw the news about Carl. Did he do it? We're investigating everyone who had access. Can you tell me about Carl Rodriguez? Competent mechanic. Quiet, kept to himself. He did his job well. Did you ever notice anything inappropriate about his behavior?" Linda thought carefully. "Not that I recall. He was professional with staff and visitors." Sarah showed Linda the maintenance log. Carl checked out keys to Thunder Mountain on July 23, 1988, between 2:45 and 4:30 p.m. Do you remember that day specifically? No, I was working on the carousel's electrical system. I didn't interact with Carl that day. Did Thomas Whitmore ever mention any concerns about Carl? Never. Thomas trusted him completely. Sarah changed direction. "Tell me about James Patterson." Linda's expression shifted slightly. James was different, more ambitious. He wanted Thomas's job. Was there conflict between them? Thomas was very territorial about his authority. James sometimes challenged his decisions. Nothing serious, just professional disagreement. Did James have access to Thunder Mountain's maintenance areas? Yes, same as Carl and me. All senior staff had master key privileges. Sarah made notes. Anyone else who might have had unauthorized access? Linda hesitated. This might be nothing, but there was an incident a few months before Kevin disappeared. Someone accessed a restricted area without proper authorization. Thomas never identified who it was, but he was very upset about it. What area? The loading platform for Thunder Mountain. Someone had disabled a safety sensor. Thomas discovered it during a routine inspection. If he hadn't found it, the ride could have malfunctioned. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Did he report it to police? No, he assumed it was a prank or vandalism. He upgraded the security on that area and moved on. Could it have been one of the maintenance staff? Possibly, or someone who stole keys. Thomas never figured it out. Sarah thanked Linda and returned to the station. She pulled the maintenance logs from March through June 1988, looking for anything unusual. She found Thomas Whitmore's notation about the disabled safety sensor, dated May 12, 1988. The log showed increased security checks after that incident. Thomas had changed some locks and reassigned key access. Carl Rodriguez was one of 3 people whose access was temporarily restricted, then reinstated in mid-June after what Thomas noted as verification of procedures compliance. Sarah called Frank Morrison. Carl's access was restricted for a month before Kevin disappeared. Thomas suspected someone of tampering with Thunder Mountain. So Carl might have had a grudge, Frank said. His access was restricted, then reinstated. Maybe he was angry about being suspected. Or maybe he was guilty of the tampering and Thomas gave him a second chance. Sarah decided to interview James Patterson next. She flew to Tampa on April 1, 2005. Patterson lived in a gated community near the beach. His house was large and well-maintained. James Patterson was 61 years old, tan and fit. He invited Sarah into his home office, which was filled with blueprints and models of roller coasters. "I've been expecting someone to contact me," James said. "I heard about the discovery. Terrible situation." Sarah settled into a chair. "You worked at Thornfield Park from 1982 to 1992. Senior mechanic, correct?" "Yes. I specialized in coaster design and maintenance. Thunder Mountain was partly my design. Tell me about July 23, 1988. James pulled out a notebook. "I keep journals of my work. Let me check." He flipped through pages. July 23rd. I was supervising installation of new safety barriers on the Tilt-A-Whirl. I worked from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. Did you go near Thunder Mountain that day? No. The Tilt-A-Whirl is on the opposite side of the park. Sarah showed him the maintenance log. Carl Rodriguez accessed Thunder Mountain's maintenance area that afternoon. Did you see him? I don't recall. Carl and I worked different zones most days. What was your relationship with Carl? Professional. We weren't friends outside work, but we cooperated on projects. What about Thomas Whitmore? James's expression hardened slightly. Thomas was old school, resistant to new ideas. We disagreed on several modernization proposals. Were these disagreements serious? Professionally frustrating. Nothing personal. I wanted to upgrade safety systems and efficiency protocols. Thomas preferred traditional methods. Sarah leaned forward. Linda Hayes mentioned an incident in May 1988. Someone disabled a safety sensor on Thunder Mountain. James nodded. I remember. Thomas was paranoid about it. He suspected everyone. Did he suspect you? Probably. He suspected anyone who had disagreed with him. But I had no reason to sabotage equipment. I wanted better safety systems, not worse ones. Ah, Carl Rodriguez's access was temporarily restricted after that incident. I didn't know that. Thomas handled key management himself. Sarah asked about the day Kevin disappeared. James described the massive search effort, the police interviews, the park's eventual closure. It destroyed the park, James said. Attendance dropped immediately. Insurance costs skyrocketed. By 1992, the owners couldn't sustain operations. Dozens of people lost their jobs. Where did you go after Thornfield closed? I worked at several parks around the country before settling here. I consult now mostly on safety systems and ride design. Sarah spent 2 hours with James, reviewing his work history and relationship with other staff members. His story remained consistent. She found no obvious motive or evidence connecting him to Kevin's death. Back in Pennsylvania, Sarah received the DNA analysis. Carl Rodriguez's DNA was not found on Kevin's remains or clothing. The fiber analysis showed the cotton-polyester blend was consistent with standard maintenance uniforms worn by all Thornfield staff. Sarah felt frustrated. They had suspects with access and opportunity, but no definitive evidence. She decided to interview Raymond Foster in Baltimore. Foster's auto repair shop was in a working-class neighborhood. Raymond was 56 years old, heavy-set, with grease-stained hands. I figured you'd find me eventually, Raymond said when Sarah arrived. Saw the news about Kevin Marshall. They talked in the shop's small office. Raymond pulled out a cigarette but didn't light it. I was 21 when I worked at Thornfield, Raymond said. Junior technician. I mostly did basic maintenance, cleaning, minor repairs. Did you have master key access? No. Only senior staff had those. I had to check out keys for specific tasks from Thomas Whitmore. Do you remember July 23, 1988? That's the day the kid disappeared. I was working on the log flume. I remember because police questioned me for hours. Sarah showed him the maintenance log. Carl Rodriguez accessed Thunder Mountain that afternoon. Did you see him? I might have. Carl was around the park constantly. He was the most experienced mechanic after Thomas. What was Carl like? Raymond chose his words carefully. Professional. Quiet. He took his work seriously. Maybe too seriously. What do you mean? Carl had very strict ideas about how things should be done. If someone deviated from procedure, he got upset, but he never struck me as violent. Sarah made notes. Did you ever see Carl interact with visitors? Rarely. Maintenance staff mostly stayed in work areas. We avoided public zones unless necessary. Did you know Kevin Marshall? No, I didn't see him until his picture was all over the news. Sarah asked about the safety sensor incident. Raymond remembered it clearly. Thomas went crazy about that. He interrogated all of us. I think he suspected someone was trying to make him look bad, maybe get him fired so they could take his job. Who wanted his job? James Patterson made no secret of thinking he could run maintenance better. But disabling safety equipment would have been insane. If someone got hurt, we'd all be liable. Sarah finished her interview with Raymond and returned to Pennsylvania. She had interviewed all surviving maintenance staff with master key access. None had obvious motives or evidence connecting them to Kevin's death. She reviewed the case file again, searching for something she had missed. Then she noticed a detail in Thomas Whitmore's personnel file. Thomas had a son named Daniel Whitmore, who had worked at Thornfield Park in the summer of 1988 as a ride operator. Daniel had been 22 years old at the time. Sarah pulled Daniel's interview from the original investigation. He had been questioned briefly, stating he worked the Ferris wheel that day and didn't see Kevin Marshall. His statement was short and unremarkable. But Daniel would have had access to his father's office. He could have taken master keys without logging them. Sarah traced Daniel Whitmore's current location. He was 57 years old now, living in Philadelphia, working as an accountant. She scheduled an interview for April 8, 2005. The supervisor's son. Daniel Whitmore lived in a brownstone apartment in Philadelphia's Graduate Hospital neighborhood. Sarah Brennan and Frank Morrison arrived at 6 o'clock in the evening on April 8, 2005. Daniel answered the door wearing business casual clothing, his hair thinning, his face showing the wear of middle age. "Mr. Whitmore? I'm Detective Brennan." "This is Detective Morrison. We're investigating Kevin Marshall's death." Daniel's expression tightened. "I wondered when you'd come. Please, sit down." The apartment was small but well organized. Financial textbooks lined built-in shelves. A desk held a computer and stacks of client files. "You worked at Thornfield Park in the summer of 1988, Sarah began. "Ride operator for the Ferris wheel." "That's correct. I worked there for 3 summers while I was in college. My father got me the job." "Thomas Whitmore was your father?" "Yes. He died 7 years ago. Heart attack." Sarah pulled out her notebook. "Tell me about July 23, 1988. Daniel sat back. "I've thought about that day constantly for 17 years. I was operating the Ferris wheel from noon until 6 p.m. The police questioned me that evening. I told them everything I knew, which was nothing." "You didn't see Kevin Marshall?" "Not that I remember. Hundreds of people rode the Ferris wheel that day. I couldn't identify specific individuals." Frank asked, "Did you have access to your father's office?" "Sometimes, if I needed to give him a message or pick something up." "Why?" "Your father kept master keys in his office. Did you ever take those keys?" Daniel looked confused. "No. Why would I? I was a ride operator, not maintenance staff." Sarah watched his reaction carefully. "Someone accessed Thunder Mountain's restricted maintenance area on July 23rd and killed Kevin Marshall. That area required master keys." "You think I did it?" Daniel's voice rose. "I was operating the Ferris wheel. I had witnesses. Hundreds of people saw me." "Did you leave your station at any point?" "For bathroom breaks, maybe 15 minutes total. There were always 2 operators on the Ferris wheel during busy periods. My partner that day was Jennifer Caldwell." Sarah made notes. Jennifer Caldwell had been interviewed in the original investigation. Her statement confirmed Daniel's presence at the Ferris wheel throughout the afternoon. "Tell me about your relationship with your father," Sarah said. Daniel's expression softened. "He was a good father, strict but fair. He taught me the value of hard work and responsibility." "Did he ever talk about problems at work?" "Sometimes. He was frustrated with the park's owners about budget cuts. He wanted to upgrade equipment, but they wouldn't approve the spending." "What about conflicts with staff?" "He mentioned disagreements with James Patterson occasionally. James wanted to implement expensive new systems. Dad thought the traditional methods worked fine." "Did your father ever mention Carl Rodriguez?" Daniel thought for a moment. "Carl was one of Dad's most reliable employees. I think Dad trusted him more than anyone else on the maintenance team." Sarah pulled out the maintenance log showing the safety sensor incident. "In May 1988, someone tampered with Thunder Mountain. Your father temporarily restricted Carl's access. Did he mention that?" "No. Dad didn't discuss specific personnel issues with me. I was just a summer employee." Frank leaned forward. "After your father died, did you inherit any of his personal effects from Thornfield?" "Some photos, his work journals, a few tools. Most of his professional materials were archived when the park closed." "Do you still have those journals?" "They're in storage." "Why?" "We'd like to examine them. They might contain information relevant to the investigation." Daniel agreed to retrieve the journals. 2 days later, he delivered 3 notebooks to the police station. Sarah spent hours reading Thomas Whitmore's detailed entries about maintenance operations, staff performance, and park management issues. In the journal from spring 1988, Thomas had written extensively about the safety sensor incident. He suspected deliberate sabotage, but couldn't identify the culprit. He had interviewed all senior maintenance staff and concluded that someone had stolen keys to access the restricted area. Thomas wrote, "Restricted CJR key access temporarily pending review." His technical skills are excellent, but I need to verify his judgment regarding unauthorized procedure deviations. Will reinstate after observation period if no further issues arise. CJR was Carl John Rodriguez. Thomas had suspected Carl of the tampering. Sarah found another entry from June 1988. CJR reinstated to full access. Investigation inconclusive. Implemented additional security measures. Will monitor all key transactions more carefully. But Thomas's log showed no unusual key transactions between June and July 23. Carl's checkout of the Thunder Mountain keys on the day Kevin disappeared was routine and properly logged. Sarah continued reading. In mid-July, Thomas wrote about budget pressures and maintenance delays. The park's owners had denied his request for new hydraulic pumps for Thunder Mountain, forcing him to rely on temporary repairs. One entry caught Sarah's attention. Thunder Mountain lift system showing increased wear. Recommended replacement denied by management. Implemented enhanced inspection protocol. All senior staff instructed to report any anomalies immediately. The entry was dated July 18, 1988, 5 days before Kevin disappeared. Sarah called Carl Rodriguez. Mr. Rodriguez, when you inspected Thunder Mountain on July 23, did you notice any problems with the lift system? I don't recall specific details from that long ago. The lift system always had minor issues. I would have noted any serious problems in my report to Thomas. Do you have copies of those reports? No. Thomas kept all documentation. Sarah searched the archived materials but found no maintenance report from Carl, dated July 23. Either Carl never filed one, or it was lost when the park closed. She decided to examine Thunder Mountain's structure again. On April 12, 2005, Sarah and Frank returned to the abandoned park with a structural engineer named Dr. Philip Chen. Philip specialized in amusement ride safety and forensic analysis. They entered the maintenance area beneath Thunder Mountain. Philip examined the hydraulic system carefully, taking measurements and photographs. This equipment is from the early 1980s, Philip said. The hydraulic pumps powered the lift chain that pulled cars up the first hill. The system required regular maintenance and monitoring. Could someone have been injured by this equipment? Sarah asked. Philip pointed to several metal edges and protruding components. Absolutely. If someone fell or was pushed onto this machinery, they could sustain serious head trauma. The space is confined, with low clearance and multiple hazard points. Sarah examined the area where Kevin's remains had been found. Could a 15-year-old boy have accessed this area on his own? Not through normal entry points. The maintenance door was kept locked, but if someone opened it from inside, a visitor could potentially enter. Why would a visitor come down here? Curiosity? Following someone? Or being brought here against their will? Sarah photographed the hydraulic equipment. The metal surfaces were corroded after 17 years of neglect, but she could still identify potential impact points that matched Kevin's skull fracture. Frank examined the maintenance door. If Carl Rodriguez entered this area at 2:45 p.m. for routine inspection, and Kevin entered Thunder Mountain's queue at 3:14 p.m., there's a 30-minute overlap. Carl claims he was alone, Sarah said. But if Kevin somehow ended up in this area, Carl would have seen him. Philip measured the distance from the ride's loading platform to the maintenance area. It's about 50 feet. Someone could walk here from the platform in less than a minute if they knew the route. Sarah looked at the layout carefully. Visitors boarded Thunder Mountain at a platform 20 feet above ground level. After riding, they exited at a separate unloading platform. The maintenance area was accessible only through locked doors beneath both platforms. Could Kevin have left the ride during loading? Sarah asked. Philip examined the platform structure. Possible, but risky. He would have had to climb over safety barriers and descend a maintenance ladder. Ride operators should have noticed. Unless the operator was distracted or complicit. Sarah pulled the personnel records for Thunder Mountain operators on July 23, 1988. 2 operators had been assigned that day, Marcus Freeman and Angela Lopez. Both had been questioned in the original investigation. Neither reported seeing Kevin leave the ride. Marcus Freeman was now 42 years old, living in New Jersey. Angela Lopez was 41, living in Delaware. Sarah scheduled interviews with both. On April 15, 2005, Sarah drove to Newark, New Jersey to meet Marcus Freeman. Marcus worked as a high school teacher and lived in a modest house with his wife and 3 children. "I've never forgotten that day," Marcus said when Sarah arrived. "Kevin Marshall disappeared on my watch. I've replayed it in my mind thousands of times." They sat in Marcus's living room. His wife brought coffee and left them to talk privately. "Walk me through your shift on July 23, 1988, Sarah said. Marcus pulled out a folder. "I knew you'd come eventually, so I wrote down everything I remembered." He handed Sarah several typed pages. "I started my shift at 2 p.m. Angela Lopez was my partner. We operated Thunder Mountain together until 6 p.m. How many riders went through during that time?" "Hundreds. The ride ran continuously. Each train held 24 passengers. We sent out a train every 3 minutes. That's roughly 8 trains per hour. Over 400 people during our shift." "Do you remember Kevin Marshall specifically?" "Not from that day. I saw his picture later, during the investigation. His face has haunted me ever since." Sarah showed Marcus the security footage timestamp. Kevin entered the queue at 3:14 p.m. The queue typically took 15 to 20 minutes. He should have boarded around 3:30 p.m. Marcus consulted his notes. "That would have been approximately the 6 o'clock train of our shift. I don't remember anything unusual about that specific loading." "Is there any way Kevin could have left the loading platform without you noticing?" Marcus thought carefully. "The platform was crowded. Angela and I focused on safety checks. Lap bars secured, height requirements met, loose articles stored. If someone moved quickly toward the maintenance areas, they might go unnoticed for a few seconds." "Where were the maintenance access points?" 2 doors, one on each side of the platform. Both were marked 'Employees Only' and kept locked. I never saw visitors attempt to open them." "Did you ever see maintenance staff access those doors during operations?" "Rarely. If they needed to work on something, they usually waited until after hours or during scheduled maintenance periods." "Did you see Carl Rodriguez that afternoon?" "I don't remember seeing Carl specifically. Maintenance staff came and went constantly." Sarah showed Marcus photos of the maintenance area. "Kevin's remains were found here beneath the ride. He died from blunt force trauma, then was hidden behind equipment." Marcus closed his eyes. "All this time he was right there, under the ride while we kept operating it." The maintenance log shows Carl Rodriguez accessed this area between 2:45 and 4:30 p.m. If Kevin entered at 3:30, there would have been overlap. "You think Carl killed him?" "I think someone with maintenance access brought Kevin into that area, either by force or deception, and killed him." Marcus reviewed his notes again. "Wait, I remember something. Around 3:30, maybe 3:40, we had a brief operational pause. One of the lap bar sensors malfunctioned. It was just a 30-second delay while I reset the system, but we stopped loading for that one train." Sarah leaned forward. "Did anyone leave the platform during that pause?" "I was focused on the control panel. Angela was managing the queue. I can't say for certain." "Could a visitor have opened one of the maintenance doors during those 30 seconds? If they had keys, yes. But why would a 15-year-old have keys? Unless someone let him in, or lured him." Sarah thanked Marcus and drove to Wilmington, Delaware to interview Angela Lopez. Angela was now 41, working as a nurse at a regional hospital. They met during her lunch break in the hospital cafeteria. "Marcus called to tell me you'd be contacting me," Angela said. "I've been preparing myself to relive that day." Sarah asked Angela to recount her memories. Angela's story matched Marcus's almost exactly. She remembered the crowded platform, the continuous stream of riders, the brief technical pause around 3:30. "During that pause, did you see anyone leave the platform?" Sarah asked. Angela frowned. "The queue was backed up. People were impatient. I was trying to keep them organized and calm. I wasn't watching the sides of the platform." "Could someone have opened a maintenance door without you noticing? During those 30 seconds? Possibly." Everyone's attention was on Marcus fixing the sensor. Sarah showed Angela photos of Carl Rodriguez from 1988. "Do you remember seeing this man that afternoon?" Angela studied the photo. "I might have. Maintenance staff wore distinctive uniforms, bright orange shirts. I remember seeing orange shirts near the ride that day, but I couldn't identify specific individuals." Did you ever see maintenance staff interact with visitors? Not usually. They kept to themselves and their work areas. Sarah pressed further. Is there any scenario where a visitor could have been brought into the maintenance area willingly? Angela considered this. If a staff member invited them, claiming to show them something interesting or offering a behind-the-scenes tour. Some visitors asked about how the rides worked. If someone in a uniform offered to show them, they might follow. Would that have been allowed? Absolutely not. It was strictly prohibited. Visitors were never permitted in maintenance areas under any circumstances. Sarah returned to Pennsylvania with new information. The brief operational pause created a window when Kevin could have left the platform unnoticed. If Carl Rodriguez was already in the maintenance area and had opened the door, Kevin could have been lured inside. But this required premeditation. Carl would have had to plan to encounter Kevin, lure him away from the ride, and kill him. What possible motive could Carl have had? Sarah reviewed Carl's background again. No criminal record. No complaints about inappropriate behavior. No financial problems that might suggest desperation. His life appeared entirely ordinary. She decided to investigate Carl's family. His wife, Maria Rodriguez, had died in 2000. Sarah obtained Maria's medical records with a court order. Maria had died of ovarian cancer after a 2-year illness. Sarah found Maria's obituary online. It mentioned 2 children, Elena Rodriguez, now 39, and Miguel Rodriguez, now 36. Both lived in Ohio near their father. Sarah called Elena Rodriguez. Ms. Rodriguez, I'm Detective Brennan with Pennsylvania State Police. I'm investigating Kevin Marshall's death. I need to ask you some questions about your father. Elena's voice was guarded. My father didn't kill anyone. I'm gathering information. Can we talk? Elena agreed to meet. Sarah drove back to Ohio on April 20, 2005. Elena lived in Columbus, working as a middle school teacher. She was tall, with dark hair and her father's serious demeanor. My father is a good man, Elena said immediately when Sarah arrived. He worked hard his entire life to provide for our family. He would never hurt anyone. They sat in Elena's kitchen. Sarah kept her tone neutral. Tell me about your father's time at Thornfield Park. He loved that job. He took pride in keeping the rides safe. When Kevin Marshall disappeared, it devastated him. He felt responsible, like he should have prevented it somehow. Did he talk about the investigation? He said police questioned him. He told them everything he knew. When they didn't arrest anyone, he assumed it was an accident or that Kevin ran away. Your father had access to the area where Kevin's body was found. He was in that exact location during the time Kevin disappeared. Elena's expression hardened. Access doesn't equal guilt. Other people had access too. Did your father ever mention Kevin Marshall after the initial investigation? Sometimes, especially around the anniversary. He felt terrible about what happened to that family. Sarah changed direction. Tell me about your father's relationship with Thomas Whitmore. Mr. Whitmore was Dad's supervisor. They worked together for many years. Dad respected him. Were there ever any conflicts between them? Elena hesitated. Not conflicts exactly. Dad felt Mr. Whitmore sometimes took credit for work Dad had done, but he never made a big issue of it. Did your father want to be maintenance supervisor? He deserved it. He had more technical expertise than anyone else, but Mr. Whitmore kept that position until the park closed. Did that create resentment? Dad was disappointed but professional about it. He understood workplace politics. Sarah noted Elena's defensive posture. Ms. Rodriguez, did your father ever do anything that made you question his character? Elena stood abruptly. My father is not a murderer. If you want to arrest him, get evidence. Otherwise, stop harassing our family. Sarah left her card and departed. She sensed Elena knew more than she was sharing, but pressing harder would require more evidence. Back at the station, Sarah met with the forensics team. They had completed additional analysis of the fibers found on Kevin's remains. The cotton-polyester blend matched Thornfield Park maintenance uniforms, but they couldn't narrow it to a specific individual. Dr. Torres provided one new detail. I found paint particles embedded in the skull fracture. Industrial paint, the type used on machinery. The chemical composition matches paint used on amusement ride equipment in the 1980s. Sarah examined the paint samples under a microscope. Can you match it to specific equipment? Possibly, if you can provide samples from Thunder Mountain's hydraulic system. Sarah returned to the abandoned park on April 22, 2005. With Dr. Torres and a forensics team, she collected paint samples from various metal surfaces in the maintenance area. The samples were sent to the lab for comparison. While waiting for results, Sarah decided to investigate Thomas Whitmore more thoroughly. She contacted Daniel Whitmore again and asked about his father's personal life. Dad was dedicated to his work, Daniel said, almost obsessively. Mom used to complain that he cared more about those rides than his own family. Did your parents have a good marriage? They stayed together, but it was strained. Dad worked long hours and brought work stress home. Mom dealt with it quietly. Is your mother still alive? She died in 2001. Stroke. Did your father keep any personal papers or files at home? Mom threw out most of his work materials after he died. She wanted to move on, but I saved some boxes. They're in my storage unit. Sarah asked to examine those boxes. Daniel provided access to his storage unit in South Philadelphia. Sarah and Frank spent hours sorting through Thomas Whitmore's personal effects. Most items were innocuous: family photos, tax returns, insurance documents. But in the bottom of one box, Sarah found a locked metal case. The lock was rusted, but intact. Do you know what's in here? Sarah asked Daniel. No, I never opened it. I assumed it was just more work documents. Sarah took the case to a locksmith. Inside, she found a journal marked private and several manila envelopes. The journal contained Thomas's personal thoughts, separate from his official work logs. Sarah read through entries from 1988. In March, Thomas wrote about growing pressure from park management to cut maintenance costs. In April, he described conflicts with James Patterson about safety procedures. In May, he detailed the safety sensor incident and his suspicion that someone was deliberately sabotaging equipment. Then Sarah found an entry dated July 20, 1988, 3 days before Kevin disappeared. Confronted CJR today about unauthorized access to my office. Found evidence he copied my master key. When questioned, he claimed he needed access for emergency repairs. I don't believe him. Something is wrong. He's been acting strangely for weeks, distracted and evasive. I should fire him, but I have no proof of wrongdoing beyond the key copying. We'll monitor closely. Sarah's pulse raced. Carl had copied Thomas's master key without authorization. This gave Carl unrestricted access to any area of the park, including the ability to enter restricted zones without logging it. She continued reading. The next entry was dated July 24, 1988, the day after Kevin disappeared. Kevin Marshall missing. Park in chaos. Police everywhere. CJR's behavior during questioning was odd. Too calm, too rehearsed. But I have no evidence. If I accuse him without proof, I could destroy an innocent man's career and life. We'll observe and wait. The subsequent entries showed Thomas's growing suspicion of Carl, but always tempered by doubt. He documented small inconsistencies in Carl's statements and odd moments of behavior, but nothing definitive. The final entry about Kevin was dated August 15, 1988. Police investigation stalled. No evidence of foul play found. They're treating it as a runaway case now. I don't believe Kevin ran away. Someone knows what happened. I think it's CJR, but I can't prove it. God help me if I'm wrong about him. Sarah closed the journal. Thomas Whitmore had suspected Carl Rodriguez all along but lacked evidence to act. Now, 17 years later, Sarah had Kevin's remains, forensic evidence placing him in the maintenance area Carl accessed, and proof that Carl had unauthorized keys. She called the prosecutor's office. They needed to arrest Carl Rodriguez. The unauthorized key. Sarah Brennan obtained an arrest warrant for Carl Rodriguez on April 25, 2005. She drove to Cleveland with Detective Frank Morrison and 2 Ohio State troopers. They arrived at Carl's house at 6 a.m. Carl answered the door in pajamas. His expression showed no surprise when Sarah informed him of the warrant. I expected this, Carl said quietly. Let me get dressed. Sarah and Frank waited in the living room while Carl changed. The house was neat, everything in its place. On the mantel, Sarah noticed photos of Carl's children at various ages, and several pictures of Carl in his Thornfield Park uniform. Carl emerged 10 minutes later wearing jeans and a button-down shirt. He held out his wrists for handcuffs. Sarah read him his rights as they walked to the police car. During the drive to Pennsylvania, Carl remained silent. Sarah didn't push for conversation. Any statements Carl made needed to be recorded and conducted with his attorney present. They arrived at the Pennsylvania State Police Barracks in Harrisburg at 11 a.m. Carl was processed and placed in a holding cell. His court-appointed attorney, David Chen, arrived 2 hours later. David was 45 years old, a veteran public defender with 20 years of experience. Sarah and Frank met with David privately before the interrogation. "What evidence do you have against my client?" David asked. Sarah laid out the case. Carl Rodriguez had unauthorized access to the location where Kevin Marshall was killed. Thomas Whitmore's personal journal indicates Carl copied master keys without permission, giving him unrestricted access to all park areas. Carl was in the Thunder Mountain maintenance area during the precise time frame when Kevin disappeared. Forensic evidence shows Kevin died in that location from blunt force trauma consistent with machinery in that area. David made notes. Circumstantial. You have access and opportunity, but no direct evidence of guilt. No witnesses placing Carl with Kevin. No DNA linking Carl to the crime. No motive. Carl lied in his original statement. He told investigators he was working on bumper cars. The maintenance log proves he was at Thunder Mountain. That's a 17-year-old discrepancy in recollection, not proof of murder. Sarah controlled her frustration. Thomas Whitmore suspected Carl. He documented Carl's suspicious behavior in his private journal. Thomas Whitmore is dead. His suspicions aren't evidence. They're opinion. The paint analysis matches paint from the hydraulic equipment where Kevin was found to paint particles in Kevin's skull fracture. Carl was the only person with documented access to that equipment on July 23, 1988. David considered this. When will you have the full paint analysis results? Within 48 hours. Then we'll wait for those results before any interrogation. Sarah had no choice. Carl was arraigned the next morning. The judge set bail at $500,000. Carl's children posted bond using their homes as collateral. Carl was released pending trial. Sarah was furious. He's a flight risk. The prosecutor, Margaret Williams, shook her head. He's 63 years old with no criminal record and strong community ties. The judge won't hold him without stronger evidence. The paint analysis results arrived on April 28, 2005. Dr. Torres confirmed the paint particles in Kevin's skull matched the industrial paint used on Thunder Mountain's hydraulic pump housing. The match was highly specific, narrowing the impact location to within a few feet. Sarah returned to the abandoned park with Dr. Torres. They examined the hydraulic pump carefully. One edge showed damage consistent with a severe impact. "This is where Kevin struck his head," Dr. Torres said. "The angle and force suggest he was either pushed backward or fell while retreating." Sarah photographed the evidence. "If he was retreating, he was backing away from someone. That's consistent with defensive posture. Kevin may have been trying to escape when he fell." With this new evidence, Sarah scheduled a formal interrogation with Carl Rodriguez for May 2, 2005. Carl arrived with his attorney at 9 a.m. They sat in an interview room equipped with recording equipment. Sarah began. "Mr. Rodriguez, you're aware you're under arrest for the murder of Kevin Marshall?" "I'm aware of the accusation," Carl replied calmly. "We've established that Kevin died in the Thunder Mountain maintenance area on July 23, 1988. You accessed that area between 2:45 and 4:30 p.m. that day. Can you explain how Kevin ended up there?" "I can't explain it because I didn't see him." Frank leaned forward. "Forensic evidence places Kevin's time of death during your maintenance inspection. Paint particles in his skull, fracture match, paint from equipment in that specific location. You were there. Kevin was there. He died there." Carl's expression didn't change. "I performed a routine inspection. I saw no one." Sarah pulled out Thomas Whitmore's journal. "Your supervisor documented that you copied his master keys without authorization. You had unrestricted access to any area of the park." David Chen interrupted. Thomas Whitmore's private journal isn't admissible evidence of my client's guilt. It establishes motive and opportunity. Thomas suspected Carl. He documented Carl's evasive behavior. Carl spoke quietly. Thomas was paranoid. After the safety sensor incident, he suspected everyone. You were the one he suspected most, Sarah said. He temporarily restricted your access. Then he reinstated it because I did nothing wrong. Frank showed Carl the maintenance log. You logged yourself into Thunder Mountain at 2:45 p.m. But witnesses report a 30-second operational pause around 3:30 to 3:40 p.m. when a lap bar sensor malfunctioned. That's exactly when Kevin would have been loading onto the ride. I don't recall any sensor malfunction. You were in the maintenance area directly below the loading platform. You would have heard the operational pause. You would have known something was wrong. Carl remained silent. Sarah changed tactics. Tell me about Kevin Marshall. Did you know him before July 23? I never met him. Had you seen him at the park on previous visits? I don't remember seeing him specifically. Why would a 15-year-old boy enter a restricted maintenance area? I have no idea. Could he have been lured there? Promised something interesting? A behind-the-scenes tour? David Chen raised his hand. Detective, you're speculating. Sarah ignored him. Kevin entered that area somehow. Either he was brought there by force, or someone convinced him to go there willingly. You were the only person with documented access. Other people had access, Carl said. Thomas had keys. James Patterson had keys. Linda Hayes had keys. But only you checked out keys that day. Only you were in that specific location during the time frame Kevin died. That's circumstantial. Sarah pulled out autopsy photos. Kevin was 15 years old. Someone struck him or pushed him into machinery. He died alone in that dark maintenance area. Then someone hid his body behind equipment where it wouldn't be found. Carl looked at the photos without visible emotion. That's terrible. But I didn't do it. Then who did? I don't know. The interrogation continued for 3 hours. Carl's answers remained consistent. He admitted accessing the maintenance area but denied seeing Kevin or anyone else. He claimed he performed a routine inspection and left. Sarah asked about the unauthorized key copying. Carl admitted he had duplicated Thomas's master key years earlier for convenience during emergency repairs. He claimed Thomas knew about it and tacitly approved, despite Thomas's journal entry suggesting otherwise. If Thomas approved, why didn't you tell him directly? Sarah asked. It was an informal arrangement. We worked together for years. We understood each other. Thomas wrote that you were evasive and acting strangely in the weeks before Kevin disappeared. Why? I was dealing with personal problems. My mother was dying. I was distracted. Sarah checked Carl's background. His mother, Rosa Rodriguez, had died in September 1988, 2 months after Kevin disappeared. Medical records confirmed she had been terminally ill with lung cancer since early 1988. Your mother's illness was stressful, Sarah said. Were you angry? Frustrated? Did that affect your judgment? I was sad, not angry. And my personal problems had nothing to do with Kevin Marshall. The interrogation ended without a confession. David Chen requested bail modification, citing the lack of new incriminating evidence. The judge denied the request but maintained Carl's bail status. Sarah returned to the station feeling defeated. They had strong circumstantial evidence, but no smoking gun. No witnesses, no confession, no direct proof that Carl had even interacted with Kevin. She decided to investigate Carl's relationship with Thomas Whitmore more deeply. She interviewed former Thornfield employees, searching for anyone who might have observed interactions between the two men. On May 5, 2005, Sarah contacted Margaret Hayes, Linda Hayes's younger sister. Margaret had worked in Thornfield's administrative office in 1988 and might have witnessed office dynamics. Margaret, now 54, agreed to meet at a coffee shop in Reading, Pennsylvania. She was slight and nervous, her hands trembling as she held her coffee cup. I've been waiting for someone to ask me about this, Margaret said. I saw something that summer. I never told anyone because I wasn't sure what it meant. Sarah's attention sharpened. What did you see? It was early July, maybe 2 weeks before Kevin disappeared. I was working late in the administrative building, filing maintenance reports. Carl Rodriguez came in looking for Thomas. Thomas wasn't there, so Carl waited in the hallway. What happened? I heard Carl on the phone. He was in the hallway payphone and I could hear him through the door. He was arguing with someone. His voice was angry, which was unusual because Carl was always calm. What was he saying? Margaret chose her words carefully. He said something like, "You can't keep doing this, and I won't cover for you anymore." Then he said, "If it happens again, I'm telling Thomas everything." Sarah made rapid notes. Did you hear who he was talking to? No. It was a one-sided conversation. But Carl seemed really upset. When he hung up, he saw me through the door window. He looked embarrassed, like he didn't realize anyone could hear him. Did you tell anyone about this? I mentioned it to my sister Linda, but she said it was probably just a personal call. After Kevin disappeared, I thought about telling police, but I didn't want to accuse someone without proof. Did you ever see Carl interact with Kevin Marshall? I never saw Kevin at all. I worked in the office, away from the public areas. Sarah thanked Margaret and immediately called Linda Hayes. Your sister Margaret told me about overhearing Carl Rodriguez on the phone in early July 1988. Did Carl ever explain what that conversation was about? Linda sounded surprised. Margaret told you. She made me promise not to repeat it. She was worried about causing problems for Carl. What do you know about it? Linda sighed. Carl came to me a few days after Margaret overheard him. He was upset. He said Thomas's son Daniel had been taking equipment from the park without authorization. Small items, tools, spare parts, that sort of thing. Carl confronted Daniel, and Daniel promised to stop. Carl didn't want to report it to Thomas because he didn't want to get Daniel fired. Sarah's mind raced. Daniel Whitmore was stealing from the park? According to Carl, yes. Minor theft, nothing serious. But it put Carl in an awkward position. If he reported it, he'd be accusing the boss's son. If he didn't report it, he was covering up theft. Did Thomas ever find out? Not that I know of. Carl handled it privately. Sarah immediately called Daniel Whitmore. Mr. Whitmore, I need to ask you about equipment theft from Thornfield Park in 1988. Daniel was silent for a long moment. Who told you about that? Were you taking tools and equipment from the park without authorization? I borrowed some tools. I was working on my car. I always planned to return them. Carl Rodriguez confronted you about it. Yes. He made a big deal out of nothing. I explained it was temporary and he backed off. Did your father know? No. Carl and I agreed to keep it between us. Did you have any further conflicts with Carl after that? No. We avoided each other. Sarah considered this new information. Carl had covered for Daniel, protecting him from potential criminal charges and termination. This created a complicated dynamic. Carl had leverage over Daniel, but also a reason to maintain silence about activities in the park. Could Daniel have been involved in Kevin's death? Did Carl know something about Daniel's actions? Sarah decided to re-interview Daniel in person. She drove to Philadelphia on May 7, 2005. Daniel met her at his apartment, his demeanor more guarded than during their first conversation. Mr. Whitmore, I need you to tell me everything about your interactions with Carl Rodriguez in the summer of 1988. Daniel sat down heavily. Carl caught me taking tools in June. He said if I didn't stop and return everything, he'd tell my father. I was terrified. My father would have disowned me. So you stopped? Yes. I returned everything I'd taken. Carl watched me like a hawk after that. Where were you on July 23, 1988, between 3 and 4:30 p.m.? I already told you, operating the Ferris wheel. Your partner, Jennifer Caldwell, confirmed you were there most of the time. But could you have left for 15 or 20 minutes? Daniel's face paled. Why would I leave? You had access to your father's office. You could have taken keys. You knew the park layout. So I didn't kill Kevin Marshall. But you had motive to keep Carl quiet about your theft. If Carl threatened to expose you, you might have acted. Carl never threatened me after I returned the tools. We had an understanding. Sarah pressed harder. Walk me through July 23rd again. Every detail. Daniel took a deep breath. I started my shift at noon. Jennifer and I operated the Ferris wheel. We had steady traffic all afternoon. Around 3:30, I took a bathroom break. I was gone maybe 10 minutes. 10 minutes is enough time to access the Thunder Mountain maintenance area. But I didn't. I used the bathroom near the Ferris wheel and came right back. Jennifer can confirm I wasn't gone long. Sarah made notes. Did you see Carl Rodriguez that afternoon? I might have. Maintenance staff were all over the park. I didn't pay specific attention. Did you see Kevin Marshall? Not that I remember. Sarah left Daniel's apartment with more questions than answers. Both Carl and Daniel had secrets they were protecting. The theft situation created mutual leverage, but did it lead to murder? Back at the station, Sarah reviewed the case timeline again. She created a detailed chart showing everyone's movements on July 23, 1988. 2:45 p.m. Carl checks out keys, enters Thunder Mountain Maintenance Area 3:00 p.m. Daniel working Ferris wheel, confirmed by Jennifer. 3:14 p.m. Kevin enters Thunder Mountain Q, security footage. 3:30 p.m. Kevin likely boards ride, estimated. 3:40 p.m. Operational pause due to sensor malfunction at 3:33. 40 p.m. Daniel takes bathroom break. His statement. 3:45 p.m. Kevin likely in maintenance area, estimated based on time of death. 4:30 p.m. Carl returns keys. The timeline showed a narrow window when both Carl and Daniel could have been at Thunder Mountain without witnesses. If Daniel left the Ferris wheel during his bathroom break and went to Thunder Mountain instead, he would have been there simultaneously with Carl. Could they have acted together? Did Daniel encounter Kevin and call Carl for help? Did Carl help Daniel cover up an accident or worse? Sarah needed to break one of them. She decided to leverage the theft issue. She obtained a warrant to search Daniel's home for any remaining stolen Thornfield equipment. The search, conducted on May 10, 2005, uncovered nothing illegal. Daniel's apartment contained normal household items and professional materials. No Thornfield equipment was found. But in Daniel's storage unit, investigators found something interesting. A box of Thornfield Park memorabilia, including employee badges, park maps, and maintenance manuals. Among the items was a key ring with 3 keys. Sarah had the keys analyzed. One key matched the master key pattern used for Thunder Mountain maintenance areas. She confronted Daniel immediately. You kept a key. After Carl told you to return everything, you kept a key that gave you access to restricted areas. Daniel's face crumbled. I forgot I had it. I swear I forgot. This key gave you unauthorized access to the area where Kevin Marshall died. I never used that key after June. I swear on my father's grave. Why should I believe you? Daniel started crying. Because I didn't kill anyone. I was stupid and stole some tools. I returned them. I kept the key by accident when I was cleaning out my locker after the park closed. I never used it for anything. Sarah seized the key as evidence. Now both Carl and Daniel had unauthorized access to the Thunder Mountain maintenance area. Either could have been responsible for Kevin's death, or they could have acted together. The case was growing more complex, not simpler. Sarah needed something definitive to break it open. The witness emerges. On May 12, 2005, Sarah Brennan received an unexpected phone call. The caller was Jennifer Caldwell, Daniel Whitmore's partner on the Ferris wheel the day Kevin Marshall disappeared. Jennifer was now 41 years old, living in Baltimore and working as a real estate agent. Detective Brennan, I saw news reports about Daniel being questioned. I need to tell you something I've kept quiet for 17 years. Sarah's pulse quickened. What information do you have? Can we meet in person? I don't want to discuss this over the phone. Sarah drove to Baltimore that afternoon. She met Jennifer at a park near the Inner Harbor. Jennifer was tall and thin, her face showing the strain of carrying a long-held secret. I lied in my original statement to police, Jennifer said immediately. Daniel wasn't at the Ferris wheel the entire afternoon of July 23, 1988. Sarah pulled out her recorder. I need to record this. Do you consent? Yes. Sarah started the recording and asked Jennifer to repeat her statement. Daniel and I were operating the Ferris wheel together. Around 3:30, maybe 3:35, Daniel said he needed to use the bathroom. He left the platform. He was gone for at least 25 minutes, possibly longer. Your original statement said he was gone about 10 minutes. Daniel asked me to lie about the duration. He said if management found out he'd left his post that long, he could be fired. I agreed because we were friends. Where did Daniel go? He said he went to the bathroom, but it shouldn't have taken 25 minutes. I was alone managing the Ferris wheel during peak hours, which was against safety regulations. I was terrified someone would notice. Did Daniel explain the delay when he returned? Jennifer hesitated. He looked shaken. His shirt was dirty, like he'd brushed against something dusty or grimy. He was sweating despite the cool weather. He said the bathroom line was long, but there were multiple restrooms around the park. It didn't make sense. Did you ask him about it? I tried. He got defensive and told me not to worry about it. Then Kevin Marshall was reported missing a few hours later, and everything became chaotic. Did you connect Daniel's absence to Kevin's disappearance? Not initially, but later, after police questioned everyone and found nothing, I started wondering. Daniel had been gone during the critical time frame. He came back looking disturbed. But I had no proof he'd done anything wrong, and by then I'd already lied to police. I was scared of getting in trouble. Why are you coming forward now? Because they found Kevin's body. Because Daniel is being questioned. Because I've carried this guilt for 17 years, and I can't do it anymore. Sarah made detailed notes. Did you see Daniel interact with Carl Rodriguez that day? I don't think so. I barely knew who Carl Rodriguez was. I was just a ride operator. Did you see Kevin Marshall at any point? No, I saw hundreds of faces that day. Kevin could have ridden the Ferris wheel and I wouldn't remember. Sarah thanked Jennifer and returned to Pennsylvania. She now had evidence that Daniel had lied about his whereabouts and had been absent from his post during the critical time frame. Combined with the key found in his storage unit, this elevated Daniel to primary suspect status. She obtained a warrant for Daniel's arrest. On May 14, 2005, Sarah and Frank Morrison arrived at Daniel's Philadelphia apartment. Daniel answered the door in business attire, clearly preparing for work. Daniel Whitmore, you're under arrest for the murder of Kevin Marshall. Sarah read him his rights as she placed him in handcuffs. Daniel's face went white. I didn't kill him. I swear I didn't kill him. They transported Daniel to Harrisburg. His attorney, Margaret Lee, met them at the station. Margaret was 52 years old, a private defense attorney Daniel's family had hired. The interrogation began at 2 p.m. Daniel sat across from Sarah and Frank, his hands trembling. You lied about your whereabouts on July 23, 1988, Sarah began. Jennifer Caldwell has provided a statement that you were absent from the Ferris wheel for 25 minutes, not 10 minutes as you claimed. Daniel closed his eyes. I was embarrassed. I'd left my post too long. Where did you go? To the bathroom, like I said. Which bathroom? Daniel hesitated. I don't remember specifically. There were multiple facilities. You were gone 25 minutes. That's enough time to walk to Thunder Mountain. Access the maintenance area using your unauthorized key. Encounter Kevin Marshall. And return. I didn't go to Thunder Mountain. Frank showed Daniel the key found in his storage unit. This key gave you access. You kept it despite telling Carl Rodriguez you'd returned everything you stole.